the first time that I pre-sold in my business, it felt as though I was selling the emperor's new clothes. I remember thinking to myself, Chelena, what have these people just bought? But if I can be completely honest, that experience has overhauled and transformed the way that I think about creating and selling offers. Because before that, I did what I imagine a lot of experts do. We spend a lot of time building in the dark, creating in silence, coming up with something that's absolutely detailed, incredible, fully built out, and then we put it out to the world and nobody buys. Nobody was expecting it, nobody needs it, and we feel frustrated, we feel as though we've wasted our time, our resources, and guilty. I had done that on many occasions, but this time I did the complete opposite and I decided to pre-sell before I had built a single thing. Essentially what I did was I sold the idea first. I got people to buy into the vision, to buy into the transformation, to buy into the promise that I was making to them. And in using that business strategy, I'll tell you what happened. People had paid me £1,700 before the doors had even opened. And so today I want to share with you what I did, why it felt so uncomfortable, what worked, what didn't work, the approach, the process that I took, and also the big mistake that I made once my offer had been fully launched. So I'm Chelena. I'm making daily videos for the next 100 days. Well, we're on day 7, so the next 93 days. I'm speaking all about my project freedom. I turned 46 last week and decided that I would create 100 videos sharing how I move my business to a more leveraged model, to a model that allows me freedom in terms of time, freedom in terms of the types of products that I create and services. But let me get back to this story that I want to share with you all about pre-selling. And what I will say was that what I was selling was a community, right? This was my very first community and it was called the Build Room. It essentially was how I cut my teeth in terms of becoming a community builder. So after the Build Room, I went on to create the LinkedIn Strategy Lab and Lisa. Now, essentially, as I mentioned, the reason why I wanted to do this, it was so frustrating. You would spend ages creating something, months even, creating a course, recording the videos, creating the resources to go along with it, building the sales page, connecting the email sequences, the automations, all the things, and then you open the doors and it's tumbleweed, it's crickets. The reality of it was that I was tired of that approach and wanted to do something different. And I mean, I've tried different strategies, so having a wait list, that didn't work so well. What you find is that you'll put something out and, people will say, oh yeah, that sounds fantastic, that sounds great. They'll join the wait list, can't wait for doors to open, let me know when it's ready, yada, yada, yada. You then open doors and nothing. In the 12-week year, I don't know if you've read that book, but the author speaks about the difference between somebody who is interested and someone who's committed. And essentially someone on a wait list is interested, whereas someone who has put their card details in and bought what you're pre-selling is actually committed, right? They have made a financial commitment to your offer. So yeah, I decided pre-selling was the way that I wanted to go. So let me give you a little bit of tea about the Build Room, right? So the Build Room was a marketing community for females over the age of 40 who were building something. So whether they were building a personal brand, maybe they were building a community themselves or a course. Maybe they were authors who were writing a book and getting ready to launch that, but they struggled with marketing themselves. They struggled with understanding modern digital marketing and turning that into income online. So it wasn't meant to be a course that just ends up gathering digital dust. Like, we weren't doing that. The idea was to come into the room, to be a part of a community, to be held accountable, to actually complete something that you start, right? To get momentum and to move forward. But given that I didn't want to go away and build the whole community, build all the resources, build the whole infrastructure, what I decided I would do was to build what are conversion events, essentially. So what I did was I created something called Saturday School, where every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. I went live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, and I taught essentially something that would be connected to the problem that I knew that these women had, but also would be connected to the problems that we'd be ultimately solving inside of the build room. So we covered things like email marketing, company pages, funnels, repurposing. It was very practical, things that they could go away and apply and get a quick win, get a result from. And this is the part that was very different for me. So at the end of each session, what I would do was to invite people to join the upcoming community, right? I would let them know that we're in pre-launch phase, right? So I would invite them in, I would take them on the journey, I would explain the transformation that's possible, I would bring them along and help them to align the problems that they had with the offer that I was making. And in terms of like my pricing strategy with this offer, the earlier that somebody bought, the cheaper they would pay. So each Saturday, the price increased. And the reason why I did this, you have to have some kind of incentive or trigger for people to take action. What you'll find is that people will wait until the very last minute of an offer. They'll wait until a minute before the offer closes. So what I found was that week on week people were jumping in because they had seen what the price was the previous week, and then the current week they were in, it had increased. So it was a great sales pricing strategy, I guess, for getting people to take action. And essentially the people who were showing up Saturday after Saturday were qualifying themselves, right? They were interested in the subject, they were like willing to be a part of something that was being built, and that's important for a community. They obviously liked the way that I was delivering the content because they were engaged. They were like leaving comments on the lives. And what that meant was that when I was inviting them to join the community, I wasn't somebody who was cold and introducing themselves for the first time. We'd built like a history, a track record together, and that obviously was more compelling. What I will say is once the payments started to come in, it did feel a little bit weird. It did feel like that whole Emperor's New Clothes, because I was very much in my head thinking someone has paid for something that I have not built yet. And my concern was that they're going to make the payment and kind of sit there and be thinking, what have I paid for? What now? Where's the thing? So I was very clear on those lives. I was very clear in the emails that I was sending that this has not been built. In fact, it didn't even have a name. It was called the Unnamed Community for many weeks, right? Because, as I've said, it was being built in the background. But essentially, what it needed was a mindset shift, right? I had to remind myself that I was not new to this. I had to remind myself that they were not paying for a fully furnished school classroom with all the modules, all the events, everything set up and pristine, right? They were paying for a result. They were paying for a transformation that I had articulated quite clearly. I had taken them on that journey and helped them to see what's possible at the end of this process. I knew that I had the receipts. I had delivered courses, programs previously. I had worked with clients one to one. So I wasn't selling something that I wasn't able to deliver. I was selling something that just hadn't been packaged yet. And there's a big difference between the two. But I didn't just take people's money and kind of leave them hanging for the next 7 weeks. What I did was that I created what I called a waiting room, or what did I call it? The while you wait. It was like a portal, a space where there were resources. The replays from Saturday's school lived in this while you wait area. So what I did, I went live on Saturdays, and then by Monday the replays came down and they were moved into that area. So I wanted to give enough time for anyone who wasn't able to jump on live to actually see the replay, to hear the offer, right? But then take it down, move it into that while you wait area so that the founding members had ongoing access to those replays. So those were there. There were additional resources, courses I had created, private podcasts. I did not want to take their money and then, as I say, leave them hanging. I wanted to make sure that they were nurtured in that time, that they were excited and looking forward to when the doors actually open to the community. And that's something that I would absolutely do again. Pre-selling doesn't mean that your customer gets nothing in the interim. What it means is that you've got an opportunity to create a fantastic onboarding experience, to give bonuses, to make sure that the momentum continues and that they don't end up with buyer's remorse. They've purchased this thing and then you go radio silent while you're building in the dark and in the background. And then an interesting thing happened. So once the money started to come in, my behavior, my mindset started to change. During that pre-selling process, 14 people had gone through my checkout process. That generated just over £1,200. I had an additional like £500 come in directly to my bank account. So before the community doors had even opened, I had around £1,700 in sales. And that money did two things, right? So the first thing was that it validated the idea. It helped me to see that this actually had legs because, as we spoke about, there were committed people who were ready to put their money where their mouth was, right? But also it meant that I could then invest into the platform that I was going to use or am using. So I utilized school, and at the time school only had one tier, so it was the pro plan, which was like $99 a month. But I could comfortably do that without having to kind of worry that, I'm taking from my own resources for something that I don't know if people want and people will actually invest in, because the offer had already started to generate money. So the business was essentially funding the build rather than me taking from my own resources, crossing my fingers, praying and hoping that people would join. It just gave me a confidence to move forward with everything that I was building. The second thing that it did was put a fire under me, because these people had paid their money. So by hook or by crook, I had to ensure that I delivered, and I always deliver. So that was never a real worry. It was more about having a deadline and making sure that, doors opened when I said they would, and they would walk in and see not a finished space, but they would see value in what they had invested in. So when doors did officially open, we had an additional 5 women come in after that kind of pre-selling process. So I ended up with 19 women in that first community. And yes, it's not a 5-figure launch story, and for me that really wasn't the point. What I had done was validated the pre-selling strategy. I had validated that I had created an offer that had demand. I had been able to use the questions, the comments, the requests from those women to help to shape the offer and refine it even further. The point for me was to prove that I could sell a destination before I had built the road brick by brick. But with all good stories, there's always something that goes wrong or something that you overlook. And for me, that was once I had opened doors, I essentially stopped selling. I stopped marketing, I stopped talking about it, I went into delivery mode. I was very focused on making sure that those 19 women were supported. They, had the right level of support, the right resources, opportunities for them to implement and to actually take action. So all of my energy and attention went into the community and the current membership. So yeah, I made that mistake. I took my eye off the ball. I stopped marketing. So we weren't getting new joiners into the space. So that was a big mistake that if I had it to do again, I would definitely ensure that the marketing continued alongside the delivery. And probably as well, what I would do would be to partner with other entrepreneurs who had, like, we had overlapping audiences, give them an affiliate code so that they could, be remunerated for sharing the build room, and maybe do lives with them, really ramp up that marketing to bring more people in, because essentially I had validated and I had tested it, so I knew that it worked. But I fell down the rabbit hole and didn't continue that momentum, and that was a mistake, a failing on my part. So I think the big lesson that I've taken away from this experience is that pre-selling isn't the end of selling, right? That literally when doors open, that's where the work actually ramps up. That's where the work begins. So let me start wrapping this up. My phone just overheated. Essentially, on this 100-day journey, I am thinking more about leverage, and pre-selling is a part of that. Instead of investing weeks and months in building something in private that ends up flopping, it ends up failing, something that I haven't validated, there's no demand for, can I let the customers who raise their hands, who pre-qualify themselves, actually help me to build what I go on to sell? Can I take the money from those pre-sales to actually fund the build? Oh my goodness, someone doesn't want me to record this video. So the phone overheated and then it ran out of memory storage, so I've swapped over to another device. Where did I get to? I was saying that with this project, pre-selling is a part of leverage. Like, it has to be a part of the conversation for me at the very least. It's gonna allow me to build things that I know people want, to get money in, to be able to do more, to be able to maybe buy a new phone, right, with more storage. But essentially, I feel like building freedom isn't about doing more, it's not about creating more. Sometimes it is about like reducing the unnecessary work, the amount of work that we do that really we could have avoided, we could have saved ourselves. We want to get to a place where we've got evidence that the work we're doing is actually needed and there's a demand for it. So I'm curious, have you ever pre-sold an offer? Have you felt like you were selling the emperor's new clothes? Is it something that you'd want to do but you haven't actually taken those initial early steps? Does the thought of like taking money before you've built something cause your stomach to like flip and flip again? Right, I get it, I completely understand. We're so programmed to believe we need to have the tangible thing in our hand and hand that over as a finished final product, when nobody told you they wanted it in blue, nobody told you that they wanted pre-recorded sessions, nobody told you that they, wanted to be in a community, right? How do you know unless you test the idea, validate the idea, so that you can proceed and build with confidence. But for me, this experience has fundamentally changed how I think about creating offers, validating those offers, selling those offers, and that is really exciting, especially on this journey. So this is day 7 of Project Freedom 46, 100 days, 100 long form videos, and plenty more experiences and experiments to go. I'll see you tomorrow.